Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Meta Club. This week's race C is a combination that we've had before, and I've got a really good anti-meta car for you. Let's get into it. The anti-meta car of the week is the GTR. If this were the type of race where it was race B and there wasn't a lot of tire wear, the GTR might actually be considered too good because it is pretty close in raw pace performance, but it definitely has worse tire wear, so in the end you're definitely going to have to work for it, but this can do the trick. I managed to get a 142.052, barely putting me in the top 100, and that was yesterday. I don't think it's there anymore, and I definitely want to get under a 143, which is clearly possible, as you can see from the various GTRs that are on the top 100. I'm going to have to work a little bit harder. There are a number of BRZs, and I believe one Lexus, and I think the GTR is your best bet besides the Meta. As you approach the first braking zone, take note that the area beyond the white line kind of shrinks and it's just grass. You want to avoid the grass, obviously. Right next to the 200 board is this black mark on the pavement, and right before that black mark on the pavement is when I want you to hit the brakes. Braking perfectly in a straight line, I want you to get down to third gear and then turn in after the 100 board. You want to avoid the high part of this curve because it can really upset the balance of the car. You're going to squeeze back on the throttle, and when you track out, you can actually go just slightly beyond that curve. If you can draw an imaginary line from this little line right here, I believe that is the actual track limit on the exit right here. I like to wait to the very end to start turning in so we don't have to turn as much. If you turn earlier, you then have to tighten your steering. Turning in later just makes it a little bit more efficient. When you do go up the hill, I like to stay so that my tires are touching the curbs, and then I take just a straight line onto the right curb. I don't think you really need to slow that down. It's a pretty simple line, just don't steer too much. It's important to note that in time trial, you will never need 6th gear in this car. At the 300 board, you're going to start turning in and then gently add brakes. I think I hit somewhere around 70%, then immediately started trail braking in. Your goal is to slow it down and try to curve the car over the corner so that you can aim to the right of the next corner by the time you land on the pavement. If I timed it better, I actually would have stayed a little further away from the wall, which would keep me away from the high part of the curb, and that would make it so I don't bounce, but instead I did bounce. I was just lucky enough that it landed correctly. I want you to take note that I didn't come entirely off the brakes, but I'm just barely touching them, and I'm going to try to neutralize my steering as I add brakes between the two corners. When my car is steady between the two corners, you can see that I'm aimed directly at the next one. I'm going to brake about 70% again and immediately start trail braking in, downshifting to 4th as my tires hit to then get the car to tuck into the next corner. I want you to note how quickly I came off the brakes, but not entirely. And I want you to see that the digital tack, that little bar right there, is touching the white line. That means my right tires are also touching the white line. I want you to see that I wait for the car to get stable on the pavement before I then add throttle. It's okay if you miss the second apex by just a little bit. You do want to make sure that you, of course, don't go all 4 tires in the dirt and the grass right here, but even just the left 2 tires are okay. I want you to also notice that I'm changing directions at this point, so by the time I come off the curb, I will be steering to the right already. Once I've hit the pavement and the car is stable off the curb, then I start lifting off the throttle just gently. What I'm trying to do as I gently lift off the throttle and barely add brake, you can see I'm only using about 20% brake pressure right here, is I like to stay to the inside of the dark tire marks that are on the track. Gradually adding more and more steering. Once you pass this little escape road right here is when I want you to hit the throttle. I always try to focus on getting to a point where I can get fully on the throttle as I pass that. You can continue steering, but you can start letting it go, unwinding the steering just a little bit as you know that you're going to make it here. Of course, you can go all the way onto the curb, but you got to have your right tires to the right of this white line. I prefer not to go super wide anyways. Looking for this 200 board here on the right. As soon as the nose of your car gets past that, you're going to brake heavily, turn in, and immediately start trail braking off. You want to gradually add steering as you're gradually coming off the brakes. And what I want you to look for is this part of the fence right here. Once you're getting past this part of the fence, that's when I want you to be fully on the throttle. It's important as you get on the throttle to continue steering into the corner. You'll notice that the GTR does not understeer very much when you get on the throttle. And by the time you get to this curb right here, you do want to use it, but you want to be coming off the steering or unwinding the steering. If you're steering too much when you hit that, you can slide out. As you approach the number boards, you're going to look for the 200 and the 100, and just past the midway mark between those, you're going to hit the brakes really heavily and turn in at the same time. Gran Turismo's ABS is extremely effective, and you want to utilize that to its maximum potential. You can see I'm fully on the brakes in 3rd gear here. My goal is when I pass the marshals there on the left, that I start trail braking in 2nd gear. As you come off the brakes entirely in 2nd gear, I want you to then add even more steering, upshift to 3rd gear, and I want you to be fully on the throttle by the time your nose passes these marshals here in the distance. I want you to pay careful attention to my steering inputs, which you can see by the red dot over the digital tachometer. You'll notice that as I'm adding steering, I'm unwinding the steering wheel pretty suddenly, pretty rapidly, and that's to try to get in front of any kind of potential oversteer. If you can neutralize any oversteer before it becomes a problem, you can then keep the grip going and you can keep up your acceleration. The next braking zone is kind of one of the toughest to actually spot. What I want you to do is look for the 200 board, and you're going to look in the distance for these tire marks. The tire marks are actually harder to see the closer you get to them. Once you get to those tire marks, you're going to hit the brakes heavily. Turning in after the 100 meter board, you're going to get down to second gear to help you rotate, hitting that apex, which I missed, and you can follow the dark marks around the apex to know when to get on the throttle. You want to stay just to the inside of it in third gear, and you can track out all the way there as long as your right tires are still touching the curb. Right before the 100 board right here, you're going to brake heavily for just a very brief moment. Your goal is to trail brake in and come off the brakes as early as you can. Downshifting to second can help you rotate, and then before you hit the apex, I want you to actually be on that throttle just enough to get the car moving, so then when you get fully on the throttle, you can continue steering out of that corner without risking oversteer. That exit curve isn't too dangerous as long as you're not steering heavily and fully on the throttle at the same time. Looking for the 100 board on the barrier, you're going to start turning in before that, and once you get to the beginning of the curb here on the left, you're going to lift off the throttle. I actually lifted off a little too early and a little too much. If you lift off later, you can lift off less. The left half of this exit curb is viable, but the right half is not. If you rely on just the right half, just the painted portion, you might get a penalty, so be very careful here. If you can, you want to line up perfectly with the left side of the track before you get to this barrier right here. And if you can't, it's important to know that if you are angled towards the grass and you add brakes, you may end up understeering into the grass. Brake at the end of the barrier there on the left and immediately start turning in. You want to be just to the inside of the dark tire marks using all of this curb and then get fully on the throttle. If you steer too much here, it can actually cause understeer. So only steer as much as you need to, keeping your right tires on the right side of that white line. Make sure you don't forget to shift up to fifth, and that's your lap. As you take the first corner, I want you to note that I do not suggest that you take the high part of the curbing. It's possible, but it adds a bit of randomness to it. When it comes to the exit, of course, I showed you in the breakdown how far you can go out. I try to stay on the painted part anyways. I like to stay directly on the curb. For some reason, it seems like you actually go a little bit faster, but it's probably just all in my head because by taking that line, you're just steering much less, and the less that you steer, the more momentum you can keep up the hill. These cars can usually go a lot faster through the bus stop than you initially think, and if you can avoid bouncing like that and bouncing there on the exit, it's going to be entirely more efficient. You can do that by avoiding the high part of the curbs. I didn't have good enough aim on this lap, but I still got a pretty good lap. It's necessary to brake really heavily initially, but then you want to use as little brake as you possibly can and let the car steering into the corner finish off the deceleration as you hit the apex. This corner is the opposite, and I think it's because of the elevation. You want to trust the ABS and then get off the brakes as fast as you can, letting it rotate in second gear and making sure you don't get on the throttle until you are in third gear. This next corner is another one that I did not do correctly. I missed the apex and I wasn't smooth enough when it came to coming off the brakes. I used a little bit too much of the brakes. I needed to trust the car, and you can trust the car as you turn into third. Dipping down to second gear can really help at the very end, but at that point you should be more off the brakes than I was. For this left-hander, like I mentioned before, if I had lifted off the throttle later and a little bit lighter, I would have been able to maintain more momentum and an overall faster time. You can also brake later for this final corner, downshift to third to get it to rotate, and then get fully on the throttle even earlier than I did. So you can carry more speed and get on the throttle earlier. There's just a lot of time to be found here. You may be realizing that this guide is an entire day late. And the reason is because I thought a completely different car would work as the anti-meta car, but when I went and looked back at the race that I was really successful in, I realized that I was perhaps successful because of luck as well as the specific opponents. If you find yourself racing against people of your same skill level who are in the meta car, I do not believe the car that I had chosen by the end of my stream would be good enough. And it's because of that that I pretty much redid the entire thing, chose a different car, did the laps, and also spent the day getting more races in. I am late because I wanted to make sure you guys got a real actual anti-meta car, not just a car that I happen to get lucky in. Anyways, I digress. The strategy here is very, very important. First and foremost, you are left with the choice of soft or hard tires, 2 tiers away. I'm just remembering that there was almost a collision right here and I just barely avoided it. Sorry, I got distracted. Anyways, it's not really a good idea to start on the soft tires in this race, even if you're at the front. Since we use multipliers for both the fuel usage as well as the tire wear, and the soft tires are so incredibly sensitive, the extra fuel weight of the first stint is going to damage the soft tires much, much more than it's going to damage them in the second stint. I did accidentally try the soft tires at the beginning, and even though I was able to go from somewhere like 11th or 12th place to 3rd place, I believe, in just a couple laps, I ended up losing something like 7 positions in just the last 2 laps because everyone else was smarter. They're on the soft tires, and the soft tires are so much faster than the hard tires that there's really nothing you can do on the hard tires versus people on the soft tires. I also want to talk about what's happening in this race right here. The person behind me bumped me in the middle of the last corner. They did it here again, and they're going to do it at least one more time. I think it was 3 times. The issue with that is, as they bumped me, coming out of the next corner, they continued trying to pass me. There it is, 3 consecutive corners in a row, they hit me mid-corner. We have to deal with custom slipstream. I've talked about that in all of my guides for the past, I don't know how long, but if you're new to the channel, we're going to talk about custom slipstream. Custom slipstream makes it so the aero wash, the dirty air that you would usually experience, is almost not an issue. That means people can follow really closely without the aero wash coming off your car affecting their cars negatively. In real life and with the other setting in this game, it's much more difficult to follow and maintain the same speed in the corners. And while you could, of course, on the long straights, utilize the slipstream with custom slipstream is much stronger than it is in real life. So the negative from following people really closely is gone, and the one positive from following people closely in the straights is much more powerful. That leads to people who are not as fast as you being able to keep up with you. And when you run into people in the middle of corners, it makes them get off the throttle in order to stay safe, and it makes it so they have to go much slower. It also ends up slowing down the person who hit the other person, making it so it's easier for them to get on the throttle. Even if he didn't mean to repeatedly hit me, the fact that he did repeatedly hit me mid-corner and then try to utilize my then lower speed through all the corners and his increased ability to get on the throttle afterwards, it's a dirty move essentially. If you have to repeatedly run into people in the middle of corners and then utilize the advantage that you gain from it, it's an incredibly frustrating way to race. And you can see from any of my other guides, you can see if I live stream, and you can see from the behavior of all the other people in the race that is not a common thing. It's unacceptable. I had to rant about it for an entire lap because it is all too common. If people hit you in the middle of corners and then they try to pass you afterwards, that is essentially dirty driving. It's just simply not fair. And if the same thing were to happen to them, they would feel the same way. Anyways, that's a PSA for those of you who may not realize how ridiculous it is to repeatedly bump people. I've actually seen people defend that kind of driving with the whole rubbing is racing kind of concept. No, that's low skill and it's dirty driving disguised as what should be done in racing. There's no room for that. You shouldn't be doing that, period. One of the big reasons I'm talking about it so much is you may have noticed that he was trying to pass me on the outside here where there's a whole bunch of grass in the braking zone, and I definitely didn't give him enough space. I did that on purpose. If he's going to be deliberately dirty or accidentally dirty, then I'm just going to give him his own medicine. It's that simple. With all of that said, I want to point out that he is, again, within my slipstream range. He's a little bit closer to me than I am to the Ferrari, at least going into the corner, but I do come out of the corner faster than the Ferrari does, and he's about at the same position. This is one of the really strong points of the GTR, and one of the reasons why it's so good as an anti-meta car. When I have a little bit more slipstream than the meta car has, I can start pulling way away. Unfortunately, it didn't make a lot of sense to try to pass the Ferrari going to the bus stop, so all of the room that I made between us ended up essentially being neutralized. The bus stop, and especially the corner directly after it, are actually the meta car's specialty. So despite the fact that I was able to get a really good exit out of there, as you can see, he was able to approach incredibly quickly. Situations like this are probably going to be common when it comes to racing the meta car, so I want to talk about what I was thinking as I did this. I stayed defensive, and that also doubled as the Ferrari thinking I was going to go for a dive, which made him miss the apex. That made it so I can get a better exit, position myself for this pass, and even though we came together just slightly, he actually got a better exit than I did. I just got the boost of the guy who was hitting me. He just happened to hit me at the correct time there. I tried to make it really obvious that I wasn't going to give him enough space on the inside, and I think that he wasn't going to go for a dive. And in fact, he seems to have just completely braked way too early. I was able to very cleanly make that next inside pass. And since the Ferrari was too far behind, I was able to take my normal line and then proceed to try to use the slipstream of the guys in front and just do my best to get away from both of them. If you look at the group ahead, they're a pretty tight group, and I believe 3 of the 4 cars are the meta car. All those guys have been grouped together for quite some time, and all of them are experienced in this game, so you know that most likely they're all just going to work together for as long as they possibly can, try to get away from any kind of danger that may be behind them, and because of that, they're going to be going really fast, bump drafting each other on the straights. So my best bet is to try to stay within slipstream range, drive as cleanly as I can, and hopefully join that pack to then hopefully be part of whatever battles happen at the end, trying to jockey for position when I can, but also trying to not bother them when I don't have to, so I can try to get away, especially from the person who kept trying to run into me. Now, while there's a lull in the action, we're going to talk about the strategy, and we're going to talk about the type of strategy that we usually use that we're not going to use this time. I say this every time. This is my weekly disclaimer. We're going to talk about what an undercut is briefly before we then decide whether or not we're going to actually use it. The undercut is when you are either going to switch to newer tires or newer tires of a better compound. And when you go in the pits, your exit from the pits should be much, much faster than the same people who are still on the old tires, assuming that it's the type of race where your tires wear down a lot. For instance, if I went into the pits right now, most people are going to be suffering just a little bit from tire wear, and they're going to probably start going a lot slower than they would for the very first couple of laps, even on the hard tires. The hard tires still can very much wear and slow down over the course of a stint. You can see that my fastest lap is a 146.4, and I was able to catch up to these guys with that relative pace. So you can imagine that if I go in the pits, and even if I just take medium tires, then I'd be able to run probably 45s or 44s. So by the time they go in the pits a lap later, I will have put enough distance that when they come out of the pits, I will be ahead of them. That's essentially how an undercut works. With the 2 required compounds in this race, it's not the medium tires and the hard tires. It's 2 tiers up. It's soft tires and hard tires. The fastest lap I can hit on the softs is 2 seconds faster than the fastest lap I can hit on the hards. It's because of that an undercut is going to seem really, really enticing, but the problem with that is how much tire wear is in this race. I do believe the Metacar has better tire wear than our anti-Metacar, but it isn't by quite enough. So anyone who goes in the pits earlier than I will is going to be very much at risk of me being able to pass them by the end of the race. On some tracks, that wouldn't be too much of an issue, but this track has one incredibly long full throttle section and a few shorter full throttle sections that are longer than average. Because of that, you just have to get kind of close to the person in front of you, especially if they have worse off tires than you, and you'll very easily be able to get much closer, and by the next corner, you can utilize your much fresher tires to then pull off a move pretty easily. Even if your newer tires don't allow you to pass someone in the corners, you just have to get a slightly better exit, which will be much, much easier with better tires going onto that long straight, and then you'll actually be able to get in front of people entirely by the next braking zone. Of course, in a perfect world. I was talking about something else, so I didn't get to talk about the fact that our friend 3 in the morning had slowed down just a little bit and he had a penalty. But the fact that he has a penalty, we're not trying to bump him just for his benefit. Of course, we want to help our friends, but by bridging the gap between him and the people who don't have a penalty, we can use him to stay close to them. So when he does serve his penalty, we don't lose the slipstream from the people ahead. Jumping 1 lap ahead, we were able to get a little bit closer to Lorenzo and take another position. And when people go into the pits, you can expect people to go in the pits on lap 6. When people do go in the pits, it's a really weird pit entrance. You've got to be very wary of people who are going in. So when you take this corner, you've got to give them space and you've got to make sure that you miss that apex and also maintain your speed. It looked like I was just able to get really close to him, used him as the apex, and I lucked out that there was no one else around because sometimes people do not pay attention to that. You can see a lot of people hitting other people into the pits. So be very wary of that. When we get to the next lap, I'm going to show you exactly how I like to enter the pits too, and how I like to exit as well. Before we jump ahead, we're going to note that we are 1.6 seconds behind Ribeiro and almost a full second, not quite, in front of Prince Plaka behind. In that 1 lap, we were able to cut about 8/10 out of Ribeiro's lead and gain a little bit more than 3/10 on Mr. Plaka. When we're going into the pits, you got to stay all the way to the right, and right before the yellow line, actually about at the beginning of the grass on the right, you're going to hit the brakes hard, stay close to the inside curb, downshift to second, then back up to third for the exit. It is completely fine if you go over the line on the right, but if you go on the line to the left. Even if you touch it, sometimes you'll get that 3-second penalty. As you come to the pits, you have to make sure that you're also holding your steering wheel or, of course, your left joystick to the right, because it will spit you out in a line that will make you try to go over that line. So don't get lazy. I actually got really lazy on stream. It's not that I got lazy. I was distracted. I was distracted by Paul Hollywood's eyes. That's a normal occurrence, I'm sure. But you've got to make sure you don't do that. You've got to continue steering to the right. Make sure you don't touch that left line, and because if you do, you'll get 3 seconds. It's possible to get 6 seconds here pretty easily. If you touch the line going in, you get 3. If you touch the line going out, you also get 3. Anyways, back to the race. So in front of us, we have AMS Get Busy and AMS Looky. Those guys started at the front. They're both extremely fast. They certainly work together at least a little bit. They'll probably battle each other towards the end of the race, but they're definitely smart enough not to battle each other the entirety of the race. So they were just pretty much out of the question. You can see that they're a full corner ahead. They're so far ahead that even if their tires do end up falling apart by the end of the race, they're too far ahead for us to do anything about it. You can see that B30212 is in front of FF Lopez, who's in front of Lorenzo, who's in front of Ribeiro. What's interesting is Lorenzo was ahead of B when they went to the pits on lap 6. And as we came out, B was way ahead. So who knows what happened to Lorenzo, but you can see that he definitely did not quite utilize that undercut, and he's also going to suffer from the tires. Ribeiro is directly behind him, and Ribeiro might be his teammate, but Ribeiro's probably trying to win himself, so he's probably not going to help Lorenzo at the expense of his own race. So as a quick recap, the guy directly in front of us went in the pits the same time we did. The guy 2 positions ahead of him also went in the pits at that same time. And the other 2 in front of me went in the pits a lap before. It seemed like my pace was better than Ribeiro's, at least when he didn't have slipstream, but now he does have slipstream, and it's definitely too early for the soft tires, even for the people who had already gone in the pits before me, to start showing too much wear and slowing down. 1 lap later, Ribeiro has passed Lorenzo, and Lopez has taken his spot back from B30212. It definitely seems like all the people who waited a lap later are benefiting from it and are able to start taking the positions back from the people who undercut. When it comes to overtakes, it's really important to plan your overtake based on where you are on the track and the specific situation. If I were to pass Lorenzo right now or make a pass either on that last corner or on this next corner coming up, chances are I wouldn't be able to pull it off very cleanly. We'd lose some time, and worst case scenario, he'd just be able to take that position right back. And if he did do that, then I would have to make the choice of either trying to attack again or just falling in line and trying to push him again to make sure that we don't lose the slipstream from the people ahead. If I did pass him successfully and we did lose the slipstream, I would still be at an advantage, but if I'm patient and I can stay within the slipstream of the people ahead, then I could potentially gain even more positions. In my stream and in a lot of different streams, you'll see people who race from the back who are more experienced, which is one reason they race from the back, and they'll complain about people trying to battle too much. And a very common thing that you hear from people, especially people who are not quite used to watching the complexities of racing, will say that it's kind of silly to complain about a battle. That's the entirety of the fun. And that definitely is true to an extent. As I saw that Lorenzo was going to go a little bit wide, it looked like he was reacting to B30212. I believe that's our friend Colin. I'm just going to keep calling him Colin now. But when I saw him reacting to it, he had left an entire car width, so I decided to go for it. Knowing that my tire wear was better, even if I had a weirder exit, a pinched exit, I was definitely going to be able to make that move happen. And Lorenzo also seemed to have just lifted off. I think he was trying to do some damage control and not have to worry too much about battling with me, because with tire wear the way that it is, he could end up accidentally spinning himself out, or it could cost too much time and he might lose a position to the people behind. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant in the middle of me saying something else. When it comes to battling, obviously you do want to battle when it comes to racing. Battling is definitely the most fun part of racing. No one wants to just drive in a line. The reason that a lot of people, including myself, complain about people who are battling too much or battling too early is because these people are not usually thinking about the race as a whole. A lot of people just want to battle corner to corner and they don't care what the effect is. People don't realize that if you battle too early or you battle at the wrong time, you're both going to lose out. In a situation where I had just passed Lorenzo earlier on, he could have easily tried to pass me, and like I said before, these guys could get away. In fact, if I try to pass B30212 right now, chances are we're both going to go really slowly into the bus stop, and Lorenzo might be able to pass both of us. We both might crash because it's a scary place to pass, and it would definitely mean that I don't have another opportunity to try to get even further ahead. Not only could I potentially fail or crash. I could also lose a position just from the fact that we're both going slower. The timing for passes is everything, and if I complain about someone trying to pass me at a silly time, it's because it's hurting both of our races, not just mine. By the time we exited that last corner, it was pretty apparent that the tire wear was becoming a real issue, and I know, again, because my tire wear was definitely better than someone who'd been battling with other people and who had gone in the pits a lap earlier, I knew that I could again take a really tight inside line on a corner where it's important to keep up your momentum and still come out on top. With the race being over just in a few corners, there's no way that I was going to be able to catch up with Ribeiro or Lopez, who both did pit at the same time that I did, but all of us ended up passing the people who had gotten in front of us by doing the undercut. All the people who were really close to us, either really close in front or really close behind, who tried to do an undercut. It wasn't even an undercut. They went at the usual prescribed time. They all suffered from the tire wear at the end, and that made it so the overcut in this race is oftentimes much more effective than an undercut or even a normal pit strategy. Thank you for watching my guide. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll be making another one of these guides next week. To finish off, I'll be leaving you with a look at my current members. I love every one of you. Thank you very much.